Have you ever heard of the Red Bloom Pact? It's a story whispered in the shadows, a tale of ambition, desperation, and a price paid in blood. It all began centuries ago with two rival houses, the Ashworths and the Briarwoods. Their hatred for each other was legendary, a feud that had stained the land with conflict for generations. They fought over everything: land, power, influence, until their endless war brought both families to the brink of utter ruin. Faced with mutual destruction, the patriarchs of both houses, Lord Alistair Ashworth and Lord Valerius Briarwood, agreed to a clandestine meeting. They met under a full moon in the heart of a cursed forest, a place where the veil between worlds was said to be thin. They sought a way to end the bloodshed, not out of a desire for peace, but to preserve their own legacies. They wanted to cement their power, to create a new dynasty built on their combined strength, one that would rule the region unopposed for all time. But what dark magic could possibly bind two such bitter enemies? They didn't turn to treaties or royal decrees. Instead, they forged a pact, a secret agreement sealed not with ink, but with blood. The Red Bloom Pact. On that fateful night, they each shed their own blood into a silver chalice, mixing it with ancient herbs and reciting forbidden incantations. They swore an oath to end their war and share power, their voices echoing through the silent woods. The pact was meant to ensure their prosperity, to guarantee their houses would flourish side by side. And for a time, it seemed to work. The fighting stopped, trade routes opened. The lands of the Ashworths and Briarwoods began to heal. They intermarried, their children playing in the same castle halls their grandfathers had tried to burn down. An era of unprecedented peace and prosperity dawned. It was a golden age built on a dark and secret foundation. They thought they had outsmarted fate, that they had bent the old magic to their will. They were wrong. The pact had a price, one they couldn't have possibly imagined. The magic they had invoked was ancient and unforgiving. It demanded balance. They had asked for unending prosperity, and in return it demanded a sacrifice. The pact, in its terrible wisdom, decided what that sacrifice would be. 1 year to the day after the pact was signed, tragedy struck. A child from the Ashworth family, a healthy and vibrant boy, suddenly fell ill and passed away in his sleep. On that very same night, a young Briarwood girl, known for her laughter, was found lifeless in her bed. There were no signs of foul play, no illness the healers could name. It was a mystery, a shared, silent grief that fell upon both houses. The elders dismissed it as a horrible coincidence. But the following year, it happened again. One Ashworth child, one Briarwood child. Both gone in the same night, without explanation, without fail. The pattern became undeniable, a gruesome anniversary marked by the silent passing of their youngest and most vulnerable. The Red Bloom Pact, meant to bring life to their houses, was now systematically draining it away. The bloom wasn't one of prosperity, but a blood-red flower of sorrow that blossomed once a year. Generations passed, and the curse became a twisted part of their heritage. The story of the pact was buried, known only to the heads of each family. To the rest of the world, they were just two tragically unlucky houses. But within their walls, a grim ritual unfolded each year. As the dreaded anniversary approached, a palpable tension would grip both families. Parents would hold their children a little tighter, praying they wouldn't be the ones chosen. The pact was indiscriminate. It didn't care about lineage, potential, or love. It only cared about the balance. A life for a life. The curse twisted the families in different ways. The Ashworths became stoic and withdrawn, their halls filled with a quiet, ever-present mourning. They began having fewer children, hoping to cheat the odds, but the pact always found a way. If there was only one child, that child was taken. The Briarwoods, on the other hand, became frantic and desperate. They delved deeper into the dark arts, trying to find a loophole, a way to break the curse they had helped create. Their libraries became filled with forbidden tomes, their alchemists working tirelessly to counteract the ancient magic. But every attempt failed, some even backfiring with disastrous consequences. The shared curse, instead of uniting them in their suffering, only rekindled their old rivalry. They blamed each other. The Ashworths accused the Briarwoods of trying to manipulate the pact to their advantage, while the Briarwoods believed the Ashworths were secretly pleased to see their rivals suffer. The trust that had been so carefully and bloodily constructed centuries ago, had completely eroded, replaced by paranoia and suspicion. The peace they had purchased at such a high cost was nothing more than a fragile veneer over a cauldron of simmering hatred. Centuries later, the story falls to Elara Ashworth and Kaylin Briarwood. Elara is a scholar, her nose always buried in the dusty archives of her family's library. She is haunted by the portraits of the lost children that line the castle corridors, their eyes seeming to follow her with silent accusation. Kaylin is a pragmatist, a skilled swordsman who has been trained since birth to protect his family. He sees the curse not as a magical affliction, but as a strategic weakness that their enemies could one day exploit. Unlike their ancestors, Elara and Kaylin are tired of the secrets and the endless cycle of grief. They see the futility of it all, the slow, agonizing death of their families. They begin communicating in secret, exchanging coded letters through a trusted messenger. Elara shares her research into the Pact's origins, piecing together fragments of forgotten lore. Kaylin provides a different perspective, analyzing the curse like a military campaign, looking for a weakness in its defenses. Their secret alliance is a dangerous game. If their families found out, they would be branded as traitors. The old hatred runs deep, and the idea of trusting a member of the rival house is unthinkable. But Elara and Kaylin are driven by a shared goal to finally break the Red Bloom Pact and free their families from its bloody grasp. They believe the answer lies where it all began, in the Cursed Forest, under the same moon, with the same ancient magic. Elara discovers a crucial piece of information in a half-burnt manuscript. The pact is not just fueled by blood, but by the animosity between the two houses. The magic feeds on their hatred. It's a perpetual motion machine of despair. As long as they hate each other, the pact will remain strong. The only way to break it isn't through a more powerful spell or a counter-curse. The answer, ironically, is the one thing their families have never been able to achieve: true unity. A genuine alliance, not one forced by fear of destruction, but one built on mutual trust and a desire for a real future. Armed with this knowledge, Elara and Kaylin decide they must do the unthinkable. They must force their families to confront the truth. On the eve of the Pact's anniversary, the night when two more children are destined to die, they orchestrate a meeting. They lure the heads of both houses to the same clearing in the Cursed Forest where the pact was first forged. When Lord Morven Ashworth and Lady Isolde Briarwood arrive, they are furious. They believe they have been tricked, that this is a trap. Old instincts kick in, swords are drawn, and the air crackles with the same hatred that has defined their families for centuries. Just as they are about to reignite the ancient war, Elara and Kaylin step into the clearing. They reveal everything. The truth about the pact, the endless cycle of sacrifice, and Elara's discovery that their own hatred is the very thing that sustains the curse. They plead with their parents to see reason, to end the feud once and for all. It is a tense and dramatic standoff. The weight of generations of bloodshed and grief hangs heavy in the air. Lord Morven and Lady Isolde are trapped between their ingrained hatred and the desperate hope of saving their children. As the moon reaches its zenith, the very moment the curse is set to strike, a chilling wind sweeps through the forest. The magic of the pact begins to stir, searching for its annual sacrifice. In that moment of terrifying truth, seeing the fear in their children's eyes, something finally shifts. For the first time, Lord Morven and Lady Isolde don't see a rival. They see another parent just as terrified and heartbroken as they are. In a moment of profound desperation and clarity, Lady Isolde sheathes her sword. Lord Morven, after a long, agonizing pause, does the same. They look at each other, and for the first time in centuries, there is no hatred in their eyes, only a shared, desperate understanding. They clasp hands, not in a pact of power, but in a gesture of shared humanity. As their hands touch, a wave of energy pulses from the clearing. The air grows still. The oppressive magical presence that has haunted the forest for centuries simply dissipates. The anniversary night passes, and for the first time in centuries, no children die. The curse is broken, not by a grand spell or a heroic battle, but by a simple, yet impossibly difficult, act of forgiveness and unity. The Red Bloom Pact, forged in blood and hatred, was undone by trust and empathy. The Ashworths and Briarwoods, finally free, began the long and difficult process of truly healing. building a future not on a cursed pact, but on a genuine peace. A new story could begin, one written not in blood but in hope. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from the forgotten corners of history and lore. See you in the next one. Deep in the dusty heart of Egypt, under layers of sand and secrets, archaeologists unearthed a tomb unlike any other. It wasn't the final resting place of a pharaoh or a high priest, but a stark, undecorated chamber holding a single, anonymous sarcophagus. This was the tomb of Khephren, a name whispered only in hushed tones among the excavation team, a name found nowhere in the grand annals of Egyptian history. There were no golden artifacts, no elaborate murals depicting a glorious journey to the afterlife. Just stone, silence, and a chilling sense of despair. Who was Khephren? The question hung heavy in the dry desert air. The mummy inside was wrapped hastily, without the sacred amulets and intricate bindings that guaranteed safe passage. The canopic jars, meant to hold the vital organs for the journey ahead, were empty. It was a burial of profound neglect or perhaps profound punishment. The deceased had been denied the essential rites, the magical spells from the Book of the Dead that served as a map and a password for the soul's perilous voyage through the underworld. According to ancient beliefs, this was the most terrible fate imaginable. A soul denied passage was not granted peace or oblivion. It was condemned to an eternity of wandering, trapped between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. A lost soul, forever searching for a gateway it could never find. The priests of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming and the afterlife, meticulously guided the dead. To bypass their rituals was to challenge the cosmic order itself. It was an act of supreme heresy or a sign of unspeakable disgrace. And then the team noticed the walls. The smooth limestone of the burial chamber was ravaged by deep, frantic scratches, claw marks, hundreds of them gouged into the stone with a desperation that seemed to echo through the millennia. It was as if something or someone had tried to claw their way out. The marks were densest around the sealed entrance, a silent testament to a horrifying, lonely struggle against an unyielding prison of rock. The archaeologists, seasoned professionals accustomed to the solemnity of tombs, felt a cold dread creep over them. This wasn't a place of rest, it was a cage. The local workers, men whose ancestors had lived in the shadow of the pyramids for generations, refused to enter the tomb after dark. They spoke of ancient curses, not the Hollywood kind with shambling mummies, but something far more insidious. They whispered of a restless spirit that Ka, a person's life force, that would become a vengeful shadow if its journey was obstructed. A soul in such agony, they said, would latch onto the living, seeking to share its torment, its eternal loneliness. The claw marks on the wall were not just a sign of a past struggle, they were a warning. As the excavation continued, strange occurrences began to plague the site. Tools would vanish from locked containers, only to reappear in impossible places. Whispers seemed to drift on the wind when no one was speaking, and shadows danced in the periphery of vision. One night, a guard swore he saw a fleeting, human-like shape moving through the moonlit ruins, a silhouette that seemed to dissolve into the sand. Was it exhaustion, the desert playing tricks on the mind? Or was the lost soul of Khephren beginning to stir, disturbed from its long, tormented slumber? The lead Egyptologist, a man of science and reason, tried to dismiss these events. He focused on the puzzle. Why was Khephren buried this way? Was it a disgraced noble, a traitor to the pharaoh? Or perhaps a victim of a sudden plague, buried in haste to prevent its spread? The lack of any inscription was the most baffling part. In a civilization obsessed with legacy and eternal identity, to be rendered nameless was the ultimate erasure. It meant that someone wanted Khephren to be utterly forgotten, not just by history, but by the gods themselves. One of the junior researchers, poring over fragmented papyrus scrolls found in a nearby unrelated dig, stumbled upon a partial text. It was a dark incantation, a ritual not of blessing, but of binding. It spoke of a soul so dangerous, so consumed by darkness and life, that it could not be allowed to enter the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. The ritual described a method to trap the soul within its own corpse, to create an eternal prison of flesh and bone. The spell warned that to disturb such a prison would be to unleash a form of chaos the world had not seen since the dawn of creation. The text referred to the bound entity as the Eater of Hearts. Could Khephren have been this Eater of Hearts? The pieces began to form a terrifying picture. This wasn't a victim. It was a monster. The hasty burial, the lack of rites, the empty jars, it was all deliberate. It was a desperate measure to contain an evil so profound that even the ancient Egyptians, with their deep understanding of life, death, and magic, feared its power in the afterlife. The claw marks weren't from Khephren trying to get out. They were the physical manifestation of a soul's eternal, powerless rage, tearing at the confines of its tomb from the inside. The team now faced a chilling dilemma. Their scientific mission was to study the mummy, to uncover its secrets using modern technology. But the ancient texts and the growing sense of dread suggested that opening the sarcophagus might be an act of unimaginable folly. The warnings were clear. This wasn't a treasure to be discovered, but a Pandora's box sealed by their ancestors. The soul of Khephren wasn't lost, it was imprisoned. And after 3,000 years of solitary confinement, it was surely hungry for freedom. The project was officially halted under a cloud of secrecy. The official report cited structural instabilities in the tomb, but those who were there know the truth. They know that deep beneath the Egyptian sands lies a prison, not a tomb. And inside, a being of ancient malevolence waits. The claw marks on the stone serve as a timeless reminder that some doors are best left unopened and some souls are better left lost. The desert keeps many secrets, and the secret of Khephren, the Nameless One, the Eater of Hearts, is one that humanity should pray remains buried forever. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows of the past. If you find these hidden histories as fascinating as I do, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more mysteries from the ancient world. Stay curious and stay safe. Have you ever looked into a mirror and felt like something was looking back? A flicker in your peripheral vision, a shadow that moves just a little too slowly? We tell ourselves it's just a trick of the light, our minds playing games. But what if it wasn't? What if a mirror could be more than just a reflection? What if it could be a prison? Today, we're delving into a story that blurs the line between superstition and chilling reality, the tale of the Mirror Witch. Our story takes us back to the late 17th century, to a remote, windswept village nestled on the edge of a dense, dark forest. This was a place where folklore was as real as the changing seasons. The villagers were hardy and devout, but their faith was laced with a deep-seated fear of the unknown, of the shadows that danced just beyond the reach of their lanterns. In this isolated community lived a woman named Ilara. She was an outsider, having arrived years earlier with no family and no past she was willing to share. Ilara was different. She wasn't old or haggard like the witches in their storybooks. She was unnervingly beautiful, with eyes the color of a stormy sea and hair as black as a moonless night. She lived alone in a small cottage at the very edge of the village. Her only constant companion a large, ornate silver mirror. This wasn't just any mirror. Its frame was etched with strange, swirling patterns that seemed to shift and writhe when you weren't looking directly at them. The glass itself was flawless, so clear and deep it felt like you could fall right into it. Ilara spent hours before this mirror, but not in vanity. Villagers who passed by her cottage would whisper that she spoke to it. Her voice a low, melodic hum, as if in conversation with an unseen confidant. At first, the villagers were just wary of her. They called her the Mirror Witch, behind her back, a name born of suspicion and her reclusive nature. But soon that suspicion curdled into outright fear. It began with small things. A child would wander too close to her cottage and return home quiet and withdrawn, staring into space for hours. A farmer complained that after an argument with Ilara, his reflection in the water trough seemed to mock him. But then people started to disappear, not many, just one or two at first. A young man who had boasted he would court the strange woman, a traveler who had stopped for a night. They vanished without a trace, leaving behind only whispers and growing dread. The villagers started to connect the dots. They noticed that after each disappearance, Ilara's strange mirror seemed different. Some swore they saw faint, ghostly faces trapped within the glass, their expressions frozen in silent screams. The local blacksmith, a stout and pragmatic man named Thomas, scoffed at these tales until his own daughter, Lily, fell ill. She grew weak and pale, her spirit fading day by day. One evening, in a moment of delirium, she whispered that she had peered into Ilara's cottage window and seen her own face staring back at her from the witch's mirror, even though she was standing outside. That was the final straw. Panic gripped the village. Led by Thomas and the village elder, a mob descended upon Ilara's cottage, their torches cutting through the twilight gloom. They dragged her from her home, her face a mask of calm indifference that only fueled their rage. And with her they took the mirror. It was heavy, requiring 4 strong men to carry it to the village square. They set it up facing the makeshift stand where Ilara was to be tried. The trial was a spectacle of fear and accusation. One by one, villagers stepped forward. A woman sobbed that she'd seen her departed husband's face trapped in the glass, begging for release. A young boy, shaking, recounted how he'd seen a shifting, shadowy figure behind Ilara's reflection. Through it all, Ilara remained silent, her gaze fixed not on her accusers, but on her own reflection in the silver mirror. Her silence was her confession, they decided. She was a witch, a soul stealer who used her cursed mirror to imprison the spirits of the living. The verdict was swift and unanimous. Guilty. The sentence was to be death by fire. But before they could carry out the sentence, the elder had an idea. He declared that to free the trapped souls and break her power, the source of her evil, the mirror, must be destroyed before her very eyes. It was a moment of high drama. The crowd fell silent, a mix of terror and anticipation hanging heavy in the air. Thomas, his heart heavy with grief and rage for his fading daughter, was given the honor. He hefted his largest smithing hammer, its polished head gleaming in the torchlight. He stood before the ornate mirror, the crowd holding its collective breath. Ilara, for the first time, showed a flicker of emotion. A small, knowing smile played on her lips. She looked directly at the crowd, her stormy eyes sweeping over the faces of her accusers. Thomas raised the hammer high above his head. For a split second, he saw his own reflection, his face contorted with anger. And behind his reflection, for just an instant, he thought he saw another face, his daughter Lily's, pale and terrified. With a roar of fury, he brought the hammer down. The sound was not what anyone expected. It wasn't the simple crash of breaking glass. It was a deafening, soul-shattering shriek, a sound that seemed to rip through the very fabric of reality. The mirror didn't just shatter, it exploded. A wave of force, cold and invisible, blasted outwards from the frame. A blinding flash of silver light erupted, engulfing the square, and then chaos. Dozens of villagers in the front rows, the most vocal of her accusers, the ones who had testified against her, the ones who had stared intently into the mirror during the trial, screamed and collapsed as one. They didn't just faint. Their eyes rolled back into their heads and they fell to the ground like puppets with their strings cut. Among them was the village elder. Panic erupted. People scrambled away, trampling one another in their desperate flight from the square. In the ensuing pandemonium, no one noticed Ilara. When the dust settled and the last of the villagers had fled, the square was a scene of eerie devastation. The ornate silver frame of the mirror stood empty, twisted and blackened. Shards of glass littered the ground, but they reflected nothing, absorbing the torchlight like pools of oil. And scattered amongst the shards were the bodies. The villagers who had fallen, they weren't moving, they weren't breathing. There were no marks on them, no signs of injury. They simply lay there, their faces slack, their eyes wide and vacant. They had never woken up. What of Ilara? She was gone. In the chaos of the mirror's destruction, she had vanished. Some said she dissolved into shadow. Others claimed she was a demon who had simply returned to her own realm. No one ever saw her again. The village was never the same. It became a place of ghosts, haunted not by spirits of the dead, but by the memory of that terrible night. Thomas's daughter Lily made a miraculous recovery. The very moment the mirror shattered, color returned to her cheeks and strength to her limbs. She would later say it felt like a cold, heavy blanket had been lifted from her soul. So what really happened? Was Ilara a witch who trapped souls in her mirror? When the mirror shattered, were those souls violently ripped from their bodies, causing their instant demise? Or was it something else? Perhaps the mirror wasn't a prison, but a gateway, a lens that focused a malevolent power. Maybe Elara wasn't the witch, but the mirror's keeper, or even its servant. Could it have been mass hysteria? A powerful collective delusion fueled by fear and superstition, where the shock of the mirror shattering was enough to cause a psychosomatic, fatal reaction in the most fervent believers? It's a rational explanation, but it feels hollow. It doesn't account for the unearthly shriek, the flash of light, or the simultaneous, instantaneous death of so many. It doesn't explain how they all fainted and never woke up. The story of the Mirror Witch serves as a chilling reminder of how thin the veil between our world and something else can be. It makes you wonder about the objects we live with every day. The next time you look in a mirror, take a closer look. Watch the shadows, pay attention to the reflections. And if you see a flicker of movement that isn't yours, just hope it's only a trick of the light. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the shadows. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the unknown. Until next time, stay curious. Have you ever heard a local legend so creepy, so specific, that you couldn't help but wonder if it was true? Today, we're rediving into one of the most unsettling tales I've ever come across, the story of the Collector of Eyes. This isn't just a campfire story. It's a piece of history that blurs the line between morbid folklore and a chilling reality. Our story begins not with a ghost, but with a box. In the late 20th century, during renovations of an old courthouse in Europe, a building that had stood for centuries, workers made a startling discovery. Hidden beneath the floorboards, tucked away in the dark, dusty space below, they found a small, heavy wooden box. It was old, bound in iron, and sealed shut. When they finally managed to pry it open, what they found inside was the stuff of nightmares. Dozens of preserved human eyeballs, each one staring up from the darkness, suspended in a cloudy, yellowish liquid. The discovery sent a shockwave through the community. Who would do such a thing, and why? As historians and local folklorists began to investigate, their research pointed them toward a grim figure from the town's medieval past. A man known only by his gruesome title, the town executioner. This wasn't just any executioner. Local legend had long whispered tales about him, painting a picture of a man who was more than just a public servant carrying out sentences. He was said to be a collector. According to the stories passed down through generations, this executioner had a bizarre and terrifying ritual. After carrying out a sentence, usually by hanging or beheading, he would discreetly perform one final act. He would carefully remove the eyes of the condemned. The legend claimed he believed the eyes held the last image a person saw before death, a final, fleeting glimpse of life. Or perhaps he believed he was capturing a fragment of their soul, a permanent trophy of his grim work. For centuries, this was just a story, a spooky tale told to frighten children and add a dark allure to the town's history. No one took it seriously, it was just folklore, right? But the discovery of that box changed everything. The location was what made it so chilling. The box was found directly beneath the spot where the old courthouse's gallows once stood, the very place where the executioner would have performed his duties. Forensic analysis of the eyeballs was limited due to their age, but experts confirmed they were indeed human. They were preserved using a method consistent with techniques from the late medieval and early modern periods. The sheer number of them, each pair representing a life extinguished, was staggering. It suggested a long and prolific career. Suddenly, the boogeyman of local legend had a very real, very tangible collection. Let's try to step into the world of this executioner for a moment. In medieval times, executioners were shunned figures. They lived on the fringes of society, often ostracized and feared. Their work was essential for the justice system of the time, but it marked them as bringers of death. They were surrounded by it, their hands literally stained by it. Can you imagine the psychological toll? Living in isolation, your only social interactions being the final, terrifying moments of a person's life. Some historians speculate that this collection might have been a coping mechanism, a grotesque way of processing the immense psychological burden of his profession. By taking the eyes, was he trying to assert some form of power or control over the death he was forced to administer? Or was it something darker? A form of pathological obsession, where each pair of eyes became a personal memento, a validation of his existence. Another theory suggests a more pseudoscientific motive. In that era, the lines between science, medicine, and superstition were incredibly blurry. Some natural philosophers and early anatomists were fascinated by the human body and particularly the eye, seen as the window to the soul. It's possible the executioner wasn't just a monster, but was perhaps supplying a clandestine anatomist, or was even conducting his own morbid studies, trying to unlock the secrets of sight and life itself. But the folklore offers the most haunting explanation. The townspeople believed he wasn't just collecting eyes, but the last moments of the people he executed. They said that on moonless nights, he would take out the jars, line them up, and stare into them, reliving the final seconds of terror, despair, or defiance of each person. The legend says he was searching for something, a glimpse of the afterlife, a sign of redemption, or maybe just a reflection of his own damned soul. The story became a cautionary tale. Crime leads to the gallows, and your very eyes could become part of the executioner's eternal collection. The discovery of the box didn't just confirm a legend, it gave it a horrifying physical form. It transformed a ghost story into a true crime chronicle. The courthouse was renovated and life went on, but the story of the collector of eyes is now told with a new, chilling authority. The box and its contents are now housed in a local museum, a silent, multi-eyed testament to one of history's darkest and most personal secrets. What's truly fascinating is how this story sits at the intersection of history, psychology, and folklore. It's a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not supernatural creatures, but real people, driven by motives we can barely begin to comprehend. The stories we dismiss as mere legends can sometimes have roots in a truth that is far stranger and far more disturbing than fiction. So what do you think? Was the executioner a heartbroken man driven mad by his profession? A budding scientist with a dark curiosity? Or simply a monster who enjoyed collecting trophies from his victims? The eyes can't tell us their secrets. They just stare back, leaving us to wonder about the man who collected them and the stories they hold. This tale is a powerful reminder to look closer at the local legends in your own area. You never know what chilling truths might be buried just beneath the surface. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the story of the Collector of Eyes. If you found this as fascinating and unsettling as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the dark side of history. Let me know your theories in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. We've all heard the stories of the Pharaoh's curse, right? The tales of sudden, mysterious deaths that plagued those who dared to disturb the final resting place of ancient Egyptian kings. The most famous one, of course, is the Curse of Tutankhamun. When Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon opened his tomb in 1922, it unleashed a media frenzy. And when Lord Carnarvon died just a few months later from an infected mosquito bite, the world was convinced the curse was real. Newspapers ran wild with stories, listing every person connected to the excavation who met an untimely end. It was a perfect storm of ancient mystery and modern superstition. But here's the thing, most of those stories are just that, stories. When you actually look at the data, the so-called curse falls apart. A study published in the British Medical Journal years ago examined the lives of the 44 Westerners identified as being present when the tomb was opened. What did they find? Well, for the 25 who were most directly exposed to the so-called curse, their average age at death was over 70. Howard Carter, the man who led the entire expedition, lived for another 17 years, dying at the ripe old age of 64 from lymphoma. Not exactly the dramatic, curse-fueled demise the legends would have you believe. In fact, many of the key people involved lived long, full lives, completely untouched by any supernatural vengeance. So, was the curse just a myth, a fantastic tale spun for sensational headlines? For most, yes. But not for everyone. Because there's another side to this story, a much stranger and more unsettling one. It's not about death, but about something that lingers. It's a story whispered among the families of a select few who were there that day. It seems that for a small number of the survivors, the curse took on a different form. It didn't strike them down with illness or freak accidents. Instead, it followed them. It crept into their minds, into their sleep, and it never, ever left. This isn't a curse of death, but a curse of the mind, a psychological echo that reverberated through the rest of their lives. These individuals, though they lived for decades after opening the tomb, shared a chillingly similar experience. They were haunted. Not by ghosts or phantoms in the traditional sense, but by a recurring nightmare. The details passed down through family journals and letters are eerily consistent. It wasn't a vague dream. It was specific, vivid, and terrifyingly real each time it happened. It didn't matter if they were in London, Cairo, or New York. The dream always began the same way. They would find themselves standing in a narrow, stone hallway. The air was thick and stale, just like the air that first hit their faces when they breached Tutankhamun's tomb. The walls were covered in hieroglyphs that seemed to shift and squirm in the flickering torchlight they held in their hand. Even in the dream, they knew where they were. They were back in the Valley of the Kings, back in that place that should have remained sealed for eternity. The silence in the dream was absolute, a heavy, pressing silence that felt more terrifying than any sound. The only thing they could do was walk forward. The hallway stretched on, seemingly endless. With every step, a sense of dread would build in their chests, a feeling that they were being watched by unseen eyes from the painted figures on the walls. They'd feel a desperate urge to turn and run, but their legs wouldn't obey. They were compelled to continue down this stone passage, deeper and deeper into the heart of the dream tomb. The torchlight would flicker, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on their eyes. Was that a statue, or did something just move in the corner of their vision? And then they would see it. At the very end of the long corridor, there was a single, imposing door. It wasn't just any door. It was magnificent, covered in gold leaf and inlaid with brilliant blue lapis lazuli. It was a door fit for a god king, radiating a strange, cold energy. In the dream, they knew with absolute certainty that they had to open it. It was an obsession, a command they couldn't ignore. This door held the answer, the secret, the reason they were trapped in this recurring nightmare. So they would walk towards it, their heart pounding against their ribs. The hallway would seem to get narrower, the walls closing in. The air would grow colder. When they finally reached the door, they'd see it had no handle, no lock, just a seamless, smooth surface. They would push. They would shove with all their might, their muscles straining. They'd slam their shoulder against it, again and again, the impact jarring them, but the door wouldn't budge. It was as if it were part of the solid rock of the mountain itself. And that's when the terror would peak. A wave of pure, claustrophobic panic would wash over them. They were trapped. Trapped in this hallway with this door that would not open. They would start to pound on it with their fists, the sound echoing unnaturally in the confined space. They'd shout, they'd scream, but the only sound was their own voice, swallowed by the immense silence of the tomb. The hieroglyphs on the walls would seem to mock them, their painted eyes watching impassively. The dream was a perfect prison of their own making. The climax was always the same. As their desperation reached its zenith, they would hear a sound. A soft, dry, whispering sound from the other side of the door. A scraping like stone on stone. And then, a voice. It wasn't in English or ancient Egyptian or any language they could recognize. It was a series of guttural clicks and low hisses, a language that felt older than humanity itself. But somehow, in the logic of the dream, they understood the meaning. It was a warning. A simple, terrifying message. You are not welcome here, and then they would wake up, every single time. They would jolt upright in bed, drenched in a cold sweat, their own screams still ringing in their ears. Their heart would be racing, the image of that golden door burned into their mind. The relief of waking was quickly replaced by the horrifying realization that it was the same dream. Again, the same hallway, the same door, the same whispers. For years, for decades, until the day they died, imagine that. Living a long life, appearing successful and normal to the outside world, but every few nights you're thrown back into that same stone prison. You're forced to relive that same moment of abject terror. It's a psychological torment that's almost more horrifying than the idea of a sudden, deadly curse. It's not a quick end, but a slow, grinding erosion of the soul. These weren't just bad dreams, they were a shared psychic scar, a mental echo of a desecrated tomb that attached itself to them and refused to let go. The families of these individuals reported that they became withdrawn, obsessed with ancient Egypt, but also terrified of it. They would spend their waking hours poring over books on Egyptology, perhaps searching for an answer, a way to open the door in their dreams, or maybe just a way to make it stop. They never spoke of the nightmare to outsiders, only to their closest confidants, and even then only in hushed, fearful tones. It was their secret burden, so what was it? Was it truly a pharaoh's curse, a sophisticated form of psychological warfare from beyond the grave? Or was it something more scientific? Some psychologists have theorized it could be a form of collective post-traumatic stress. The act of breaking into a tomb, a place of the dead that had been sealed for 3,000 years, is a profound transgression. Perhaps the guilt and the sheer awe of the moment imprinted itself on their subconscious minds in a uniquely powerful way, manifesting as this shared nightmare. Another theory points to something environmental. Could there have been a type of dormant, psychoactive mold spore inside the tomb? When the seal was broken, these spores were released into the air and inhaled by the excavators. Perhaps this fungus didn't cause immediate physical illness, but had a long-term neurological effect, altering their brain chemistry and predisposing them to this specific recurring dream. It sounds like science fiction, but we know that certain molds can have powerful effects on the human mind. Or maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what it felt like to them. A curse, a non-lethal but endlessly cruel punishment. Not designed to kill the body, but to trap the mind. A warning from the ancient world that some doors are meant to remain closed forever. The curse of Tutankhamun may not have been the killer the newspapers claimed it was, but for a handful of people, it became a lifelong sentence in a prison of the mind. It proves that sometimes the most terrifying ghosts are the ones that live inside our own heads. What do you think? Was it guilt, a fungus, or something far more ancient and mysterious? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this dive into the unknown, don't forget to like and subscribe for more strange histories. Ever heard of a love story so powerful it defied death itself? Well, today we're diving into a tale that's part romance, part horror, and 100% chilling. This is the legend of the Bride of the Undying King. Our story begins in a kingdom lost to time, ruled by a powerful and obsessive king. He was known for his vast wealth and military might, but his greatest treasure was his queen. She was celebrated throughout the land for her beauty, wisdom, and kindness. Their love was the stuff of legends, a perfect fairy tale, or so it seemed. The king, however, had a deep, dark fear of mortality. He couldn't bear the thought of one day being separated from his beloved wife by death. So, he delved into forbidden arts and ancient, forgotten magic, searching for a way to achieve eternal life, not just for himself, but for both of them. He wanted them to rule together, forever. Tragically, before he could complete his dark rituals, the queen fell gravely ill. A mysterious sickness swept through the palace, and despite the efforts of the best physicians in the kingdom, she passed away. The king was shattered, his world crumbled. But his grief quickly twisted into a terrifying resolve. If he couldn't keep her alive, he would make sure they were reunited in death. This is where the story takes a sinister turn. The king declared that their love was too strong to be broken by something as trivial as death. He ordered the construction of a magnificent, impenetrable tomb, a palace for the afterlife. Inside, he was laid to rest with all the splendor befitting a monarch. But he wasn't alone. In a horrifying act of love, he commanded that his deceased queen be buried with him. But that's not the part that sends shivers down your spine. Legends whisper that the queen wasn't actually dead. Some say she was in a deep, coma-like state, mistaken for dead. Others claim the king, in his madness, deliberately had her entombed while she was still breathing. He sealed her alive inside the cold, dark stone, believing this was the only way for her to rule beside him forever as his undying bride. The kingdom mourned not just for their lost queen, but for the king's descent into madness. For centuries, the tomb remained a place of fear and sorrow, a monument to a love that had become a curse. Treasure hunters and historians were too afraid to disturb the final resting place of the undying king and his bride. The stories kept them away, tales of ghostly wails echoing from the stone on moonless nights, and a chilling aura that clung to the site. Then, in the early 20th century, a team of audacious archaeologists, led by a man named Dr. Alistair Finch, decided to brave the curse. They were scholars, men of science who dismissed the local legends as mere folklore. They were after history, not ghosts. After months of difficult excavation, they finally breached the entrance to the royal tomb. What they found inside was beyond anything they could have imagined. The antechamber was filled with unimaginable treasures, gold, jewels, and artifacts of a long-lost era. Everything was perfectly preserved, untouched for centuries. As they moved deeper, they found the king's sarcophagus, a masterpiece of stone and gold, depicting him as a godlike ruler. It was sealed tight, a silent testament to his power. But it was the second sarcophagus, the one belonging to the queen, that held the true horror. It was simpler, more elegant, but something was terribly wrong. As the team brought their lanterns closer, they saw it. The smooth, polished stone of the interior lid was covered in frantic scratch marks. The surface was shredded, gouged deep by what could only be fingernails. The stone around the edges was chipped and broken, signs of a desperate, futile struggle to escape. The team stood in stunned silence. The legends were true. The queen had been sealed in here alive. They could almost feel her terror, her last, desperate moments spent in pitch darkness, clawing at the unyielding stone, gasping for air that was slowly running out. The evidence was undeniable and horrifying. She had awakened in her own tomb, trapped with the corpse of her obsessive husband. Dr. Finch's journal from that day describes the chilling discovery. He wrote, "We have not uncovered a tomb, but a scene of unspeakable cruelty. The folklore spoke of an undying bride, but the truth is so much more tragic. She did not rule beside him. She died in terror, alone in the dark." The discovery sent shockwaves through the academic world and revitalized the old legends. People no longer saw it as a twisted love story, but as a horrifying tale of obsession and abuse of power. The king wasn't a romantic. He was a monster who couldn't let go, and his queen paid the ultimate price for his selfishness. But the story doesn't quite end there. The archaeologists who opened the tomb were said to be plagued by misfortune. Dr. Finch himself died a few years later from a mysterious wasting illness, much like the one that had claimed the queen. Other members of the team suffered accidents, financial ruin, or bouts of madness. The locals whispered that the spirit of the queen, disturbed from her tragic rest, had attached itself to those who uncovered her final, terrifying moments. They believe her ghost still wanders, not as a queen, but as a warning against a love that consumes and destroys. So what do you think? Was it a curse or just a series of tragic coincidences? Does the spirit of the tormented queen still seek peace, or perhaps revenge? It's a haunting story that reminds us that the line between love and obsession can be dangerously thin. What starts as a fairy tale can easily become a nightmare. Thanks for watching, and if you have any theories about the Bride of the Undying King, drop them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more dives into history's darkest legends. See you next time. Have you ever heard a story that just sticks with you? A whisper from the past that feels so strange, so unsettling that you can't shake it. Today, we're diving into one of those stories, a chilling fragment of history that has puzzled scholars for centuries. It's the legend of the Nun of the Split Light. Our story begins in the shadowed corridors of a remote 13th century convent, tucked away in the rugged hills of what is now northern Italy. This wasn't a place you'd stumble upon by accident. It was a cloister for women seeking a life of extreme piety, silence, and seclusion. Life here was harsh, dictated by prayer, fasting, and work. But within these austere walls, a figure emerged who was anything but ordinary. Her name, as it appears in a handful of surviving letters and manuscripts, was Sister Agnes. We don't know much about her early life. Records from this era, especially concerning women, are notoriously scarce. But the whispers about Agnes weren't about her family or her origins. They were about something far more peculiar. Travelers and local villagers who glimpsed her through the convent's grill spoke of an unsettling sight. They claim that Sister Agnes cast two shadows. Imagine that for a moment. In the flickering torchlight of a medieval chapel or the low sun of a winter afternoon, one woman stood, but two distinct shadows stretched out behind her. One account, from a traveling merchant seeking shelter, describes it vividly. He wrote in a letter to his brother that he saw the nun through an archway, praying in the courtyard. He said one shadow was solid and dark, behaving as a shadow should, but the other was faint, ethereal, and seemed to move with a slight delay, like an echo made of darkness. He called it a stain upon the air. This wasn't a one-time sighting. Similar accounts pop up in different personal journals and local folklore. Some said the second shadow was twisted, a contorted version of her own silhouette. Others swore it would sometimes detach from her feet and drift along the stone walls before rejoining her. The villagers began to murmur. Was she blessed? Was she cursed? The phenomenon earned her the name she's known by today, the Nun of the Split Light. Inside the convent, the reaction was likely one of fear and confusion. For the other nuns, living in such close quarters, this must have been a daily source of terror or awe. Did they see it too? Unfortunately, the internal records of the convent are where the story takes an even darker turn. The official chronicles, the day-to-day logs kept by the abbess, are almost entirely intact for that century, except for a specific period of about 5 years. Right where the entries about Sister Agnes should be, the pages have been violently torn out. Not just one or two, but a whole section. All that remains are ragged edges and a few stray words clinging to the binding. Words like umbra duplex, which is Latin for double shadow, and affliction, this. Deliberate destruction of records is incredibly significant. In the medieval church, record-keeping was a sacred duty. To tear pages from a convent's chronicle was an act of profound desperation, a desperate attempt to erase something from history. What could have been so terrible that the only solution was to pretend it never happened? This is where historical fact ends and scholarly speculation begins. We have the witness accounts of the two shadows and the physical evidence of the torn-out pages. Everything else is a puzzle. One theory suggests that Agnes might have been suffering from a rare neurological or psychological condition that was interpreted through the lens of medieval superstition, perhaps a form of dissociative identity disorder, where her other self was projected as a physical shadow in the minds of those around her, a mass psychological event. It's a stretch, but in an age where science was indistinguishable from magic, it's a possibility. Another, more unsettling theory leans into the supernatural beliefs of the time. Some historians who've studied the case propose that the convent believed Agnes was possessed, but not by a typical demon. They point to obscure theological texts from the period that discuss shade spirits or echo souls, entities that could latch onto a person, creating a parasitic twin of light and darkness. According to this theory, the second shadow was a manifestation of this entity. The torn-out pages then wouldn't just be hiding a strange phenomenon. They'd be concealing the details of a horrifying and perhaps unsuccessful exorcism. What's most fascinating is how the story just ends. After that 5-year gap, Agnes is never mentioned again. There's no record of her death, no mention of her being transferred to another convent, nothing. She simply vanishes from history, leaving only her eerie nickname and a void in the archives. It's as if she and her second shadow walked out of the pages of the book and into pure mystery. One final piece of this puzzle comes from local folklore. For generations after, the villagers in the nearby towns told stories to scare their children. They spoke of a ghostly nun who wandered the hills on moonless nights, searching for something she had lost. They said if you saw her, you must never look at her feet, for you would see not one shadow, but two, trailing behind her like a tattered cloak. And they warned that if the second shadow touched yours, a piece of your own light would be stolen forever. So, who was the Nun of the Split Light? A saint whose divine nature was too complex for our world. A woman afflicted with a strange medical condition misunderstood by her time? Or the victim of something much, much darker that had to be erased from memory? The truth was torn from the history books, leaving us with a story that is all the more powerful for its incompleteness. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones that lurk not in the dark, but in the unsettling space between the light and the shadow. What do you think happened to Sister Agnes? Let me know your theories down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's strangest mysteries. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next exploration into the unknown. Until next time, stay curious. Imagine you're walking along a field on a quiet afternoon, just scanning the ground with your metal detector. Suddenly, you get a signal, a strong one. You start to dig and your shovel hits something hard. You clear away the earth and find a few old green-tinged coins. You're thrilled, of course, a great find. But what if you kept digging and those few coins turned into a few hundred, then a few thousand? And then you realize you've stumbled upon something monumental, a treasure so vast it feels unreal. This isn't a fantasy. This is exactly what happened to Reg Mead and Richard Miles on the island of Jersey, one of the Channel Islands nestled between Britain and France. For decades, they had heard whispers and local legends about a stash of Celtic coins buried somewhere on the island. A farmer had supposedly found some back in the 1950s, but the exact location was lost to time. Fueled by this local lore, Reg and Richard spent over 30 years searching, patiently sweeping fields with their detectors, hoping to uncover this piece of history. Then, in 2012, their persistence paid off in a way they could never have imagined. After getting that first strong signal and unearthing a small handful of silver coins, they knew they were onto something big. They called in archaeologists, and what followed was an excavation that would rewrite history. As the team carefully dug deeper, they uncovered not just a pot of coins, but a massive, solidified block of earth and metal. It was so heavy, it had to be lifted out of the ground with a crane. This colossal lump, weighing over a ton, was taken to a lab for meticulous examination. And inside, piece by piece, an astonishing secret was revealed. The block contained an estimated 70,000 Celtic and Roman coins, all fused together with clay and corrosion over 2 millennia. This incredible find was named the Lee Caitelan II Hoard, and it is the largest collection of Celtic coins ever discovered. But this treasure is so much more than just a pile of ancient money. It's a time capsule, a snapshot of a moment of pure panic and desperation. So, who buried all this wealth, and why did they never come back for it? To answer that, we need to journey back in time, over 2,000 years ago, to the 1st century BC. The world was in turmoil. The Roman Republic, led by the ambitious and ruthless General Julius Caesar, was expanding its empire. Caesar had set his sights on conquering Gaul, a vast territory that included modern-day France, Belgium, and parts of surrounding countries. The people living there were a collection of Celtic tribes, often referred to as the Gauls. They were fierce warriors, skilled craftsmen, and had a rich culture of their own. One of these tribes was the Coriosalite, who lived in the region of Brittany, just across the water from the island of Jersey. As Caesar's legions marched across Gaul, they brought war and devastation. Towns were sacked and entire populations were displaced. The Celtic tribes fought back bravely, but they were often disorganized and outmatched by the disciplined Roman army. In 56 BC, a major naval battle took place off the coast of Brittany. Caesar's fleet clashed with the combined forces of the maritime Celtic tribes, including the Coriosalite. The Romans emerged victorious, crushing the Celtic resistance in the region. This defeat would have sent shockwaves of fear throughout the coastal communities. It was a clear signal that the Romans were coming and nothing could stop them. It's in this climate of absolute terror that scholars believe the Lee Caitelan II Hoard was buried. Imagine being a member of the Coriosalite tribe. You hear news of the Roman victory. Your neighbors, your allies, have been defeated. You know, it's only a matter of time before Caesar's soldiers arrive at your own doorstep. Panic sets in. What do? You gather everything you hold dear, everything of value. The hoard isn't just coins. Mixed in with the tens of thousands of silver and gold alloy coins, archaeologists also found precious gold torques, which were neck rings worn by high-status individuals, as well as silver bracelets, and even delicate pieces of fabric and organic material preserved against the metal. This tells us it wasn't just one wealthy person's savings. The sheer scale and variety of the treasure suggests that an entire community, or perhaps several communities, pooled their collective wealth together. This was their life savings, their family heirlooms, their entire treasury. They packed it all into a deep pit they dug in a field, a place they hoped would be safe, a place they could find again. The act of burying it was an act of hope. They weren't abandoning their fortune, they were protecting it. The plan was simple: hide the treasure, flee from the approaching Roman danger, and once the coast was clear, return to reclaim their lives and their wealth. They would have told their children stories of the spot, passed down markers and memories, ensuring the treasure's location would not be forgotten. But they never came back. Not a single person. What happened to them? The historical record is silent on their specific fate, but we can make some educated guesses. They may have been captured by Roman soldiers, sold into slavery, or killed in the conflicts that continued to rage across Gaul. Perhaps they managed to escape, but were never able to safely return to Jersey. Or maybe disease or famine, common in the aftermath of war, claimed them before they had a chance. Whatever the reason, their story ended, and their secret treasure lay dormant beneath the soil. For centuries, farmers plowed the fields above it, completely unaware of the fortune just a few feet below. Generations came and went. The Roman Empire rose and fell. The island of Jersey changed hands between England and France. And all the while, the coins waited. The process of excavating the hoard is a monumental task in itself. It's not like a pirate chest you can just flip open. The coins, soil, and artifacts have fused into a single, solid mass. Archaeologists are using cutting-edge technology, including 3D scanning and X-rays, to map the block before they even begin to take it apart. Then, with painstaking precision, they are separating each individual coin and artifact one by one. It's a process that is expected to take many more years to complete. Each coin they free from the mass is a piece of the puzzle. The coins themselves are beautiful works of art. They don't feature the realistic portraits of Roman emperors. Instead, they are decorated with stylized, almost abstract designs, swirling patterns, disjointed horses, and symbolic representations of their gods and mythology. These designs are unique to the Coriosolitae and other Celtic tribes, giving us a direct link to their culture and artistic expression. The hoard is also a treasure trove of information. By studying the composition of the metals, experts can learn about the tribe's economy and trade networks. By analyzing the wear and tear on the coins, they can understand how money circulated in their society. And by mapping the exact position of each object within the hoard, they can learn about the moments leading up to its burial. Was it packed in a hurry? Was it placed in bags or containers that have since rotted away? Every detail matters. The discovery of the Le Catelyn II hoard is a poignant reminder of the human cost of war. It's easy to read about historical events like Caesar's Gallic Wars as a series of dates and battles. But this treasure brings the story to life in a deeply personal way. It represents the hopes and fears of thousands of real people who loved their families, valued their possessions, and dreamed of a future that was stolen from them. They buried their world in a field, hoping to one day dig it back up, but instead, they left behind a legacy that would captivate us 2,000 years later. So, the next time you see a picture of an ancient coin, remember the story it might hold. It's not just a piece of metal. It's a connection to the past, a symbol of a life lived, and sometimes a heartbreaking story of a treasure that was never reclaimed. The work on the Le Catelyn II hoard continues, and with every new discovery, we learn more about the lost community that left it all behind. It's a story of incredible wealth, profound loss, and the enduring power of history waiting just beneath our feet. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into incredible historical discoveries. See you next time. Deep in the jungles of Chiapas, Mexico, lies the ancient Mayan city of Palenque. For centuries, its secrets were buried beneath dense vegetation. But in 1952, archaeologist Alberto Ruiz Lullier made a discovery that would rewrite history and ignite a debate that rages to this day. After 4 long years of clearing rubble from a hidden passageway inside the Temple of the Inscriptions, he finally reached the burial chamber of a great Mayan king, Cainich Janab Pakal, or Pakal the Great. And on the lid of his sarcophagus was an image so baffling, so futuristic, that it has been called one of the most mysterious artifacts in the world. It's a massive, intricately carved stone slab, 5 tons of pure enigma. At its center is a man, Pakel, reclining in a posture that seems unnatural. His hands are on what look like controls. His left foot is on a pedal. His face is turned upwards with a device over his nose that resembles a breathing apparatus. He's seated inside a complex contraption with flames and smoke billowing from the bottom. To many, the image is unmistakable. It's a man in a cockpit, piloting a machine. A rocket ship. This is the story of the Palenque astronaut. The most famous proponent of this theory was Erich von Däniken, author of the blockbuster book Chariots of the Gods. He argued that this carving was clear proof of ancient astronauts, extraterrestrial beings who visited our ancestors and shared their advanced technology. He saw Pakel not as a Mayan king on a journey to the underworld, but as an astronaut blasting off into the cosmos. Look at the details, he pointed out. The pointed nose cone of the craft, the intricate machinery with levers, cables, and gadgets, the fire and exhaust fumes shooting from the tail, just like a modern rocket launch. He even suggested the man's posture, leaning back, is identical to that of astronauts during liftoff bracing against the G-forces. Could it be? Could the ancient Maya have witnessed or even possessed technology far beyond their time? Did they carve this image as a literal record of an event they saw with their own eyes? For decades, this idea captured the public imagination. It fed into a growing fascination with UFOs and the possibility that we are not alone in the universe. The Palenque astronaut became a poster child for the ancient alien theory, a piece of hard physical evidence that seemed to defy conventional explanation. It's an incredibly compelling idea. An ancient civilization, known for its pyramids and calendars, secretly holding the key to space travel. But as with any great mystery, there's another side to the story. Mainstream archaeologists and Mayan scholars offer a very different, yet equally fascinating interpretation. They argue that to understand the carving, we can't look at it with 21st century eyes. We have to see it through the eyes of the ancient Maya themselves. For them, this isn't a spaceship. It's a powerful and complex piece of religious symbolism. Pakel isn't launching into space. He's descending into the underworld, Xibalba. This was a crucial part of the Mayan belief system. Death was not an end, but a transition, a journey. The sarcophagus lid depicts the precise moment of Pakel's death and the beginning of his journey toward rebirth and deification. Let's break down the symbolism from their perspective. The rocket ship is actually the world tree or Wakachan, the axis of the cosmos that connects the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. Pakel is shown falling down the trunk of this tree, from the world of the living into the realm of the dead. The flames and smoke at the bottom aren't from a rocket engine. They represent the jaws of a celestial monster, the Sakyuk Mut, a skeletal serpent that serves as the portal to Xibalba. Pakel is being swallowed by the underworld. What about the controls and pedals? Scholars identify these as symbolic elements of the world tree. His hands aren't gripping levers. They're in a specific gesture, interacting with the tree's sacred essence. The breathing apparatus is likely a piece of traditional Mayan jewelry, a nose ornament or a representation of the breath of life, which was a central concept in their culture. The figure at the very top of the carving, which ancient alien theorists sometimes call an antenna, is actually the celestial bird or Itzamnia, a principal deity perched at the top of the world tree, representing the heavens. So, the entire scene isn't about technology. It's about cosmology. It's a map of the Mayan universe and Pakel's place within it. He's positioned at the very center of creation, at the crucial intersection between life, death, and divinity. The carving tells the story of his royal lineage, his divine right to rule, and his ultimate transformation into a god upon death, destined to be reborn like the maize god. When you decipher the Mayan glyphs inscribed around the edges of the lid, this interpretation becomes even stronger. The text doesn't talk about flight speeds or star charts. It talks about Pakel's ancestors, key dates from his life, and mythological events tied to creation and divinity. It's a narrative that firmly grounds the image in Mayan religious belief. So where does that leave us? We have two compelling narratives. One is a thrilling sci-fi tale of ancient astronauts and forgotten technology, a story that challenges our understanding of the past. The other is a rich, complex tapestry of mythology, religion, and art. revealing the profound worldview of a lost civilization. The scientific and academic consensus overwhelmingly supports the mythological interpretation. The evidence from Mayan art, writing, and archaeology all points in the same direction. The sarcophagus lid is a masterpiece of Mayan religious art, not a blueprint for a spacecraft. But the allure of the astronaut theory persists. Why? Perhaps it's because it's more exciting. It taps into our modern fascination with space and the unknown. It's also, in a way, easier to understand. We recognize what looks like a rocket because we live in the age of space exploration. It's much harder to immerse ourselves in the complex and alien belief system of a culture that vanished centuries ago. It's a classic case of seeing what we want to see or what we're culturally conditioned to see. But maybe the real magic of the Palenque lid is in whether it's a king or an astronaut. The real magic is that it forces us to ask these questions. Is a piece of art so powerful and so strange that it can be interpreted in wildly different ways, each telling us something about ourselves? The ancient alien theory tells us about our hopes and fears, about the cosmos and our place in it. The mythological explanation tells us about our ability to painstakingly decode the past, to listen to the stories ancient people told about themselves in their own words. Ultimately, Pakel's journey, whether to the stars or to the underworld, remains one of history's most captivating visual puzzles. It's a reminder that the past is not always as it seems, and that buried beneath the stone and soil of our world lie mysteries that continue to challenge, inspire, and ignite our imagination. What do you think? Is Pakel a cosmic traveler frozen in stone or a divine king on a symbolic journey through the Mayan universe? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey into the past, don't forget to like and subscribe for more explorations of history's greatest mysteries. Imagine walking by a peaceful river in northern Germany, the water gently flowing, birds singing in the trees. Now, imagine digging into the riverbank and finding a human skull, split open by a weapon from over 3,000 years ago. This isn't a scene from a horror movie. This is the reality of the Talens Valley. Welcome to what might be Europe's oldest and most brutal battlefield. For centuries, the Talens River Valley was just quiet, unremarkable German countryside. But in 1996, an amateur archaeologist stumbled upon a human arm bone sticking out of the riverbank, and in it was embedded a flint arrowhead. This was just the beginning. What followed was one of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries of our time. As experts began to excavate, the true, horrifying story of this valley started to emerge. They weren't just finding a few artifacts. They were uncovering a massive, prehistoric battlefield frozen in time. The scale is staggering. So far, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of hundreds of individuals, but they estimate that thousands more lie buried in the mud. We're talking about a conflict that may have involved up to 4,000 people. A number that is absolutely mind-blowing for the Bronze Age. Around 1250 BC, to put that in perspective, at that time the population of this entire region was sparse. An army of this size would have been a monumental gathering. And the evidence of violence is everywhere. It's visceral. It's personal. Skulls have been found with massive, unhealed fractures consistent with being bashed by wooden clubs. Other skeletons show injuries from bronze-tipped spears and arrows. Some bones show signs of being pierced and then twisted, a gruesome detail suggesting the attackers were trying to retrieve their valuable bronze spearheads from their victims. This wasn't a clean, distant fight. This was brutal, face-to-face combat. One of the most haunting finds is a wooden club shaped like a baseball bat or a croquet mallet. When you see it, you can almost feel the weight of it, and you can easily imagine the devastating impact it would have had on a human skull. Another find that sends a chill down your spine is the discovery of horse remains, suggesting that cavalry might have been part of the battle, thundering across the field. So who were these people, and why were they fighting? This is the great mystery of the Talens Valley. The skeletons themselves offer some clues. Isotope analysis of their teeth, which can reveal where a person grew up based on the water they drank, shows that many of the warriors were not local. They came from hundreds of kilometers away, from regions in modern-day Poland, the Czech Republic, and even southern Scandinavia. This wasn't a local skirmish between neighboring tribes. This was an organized, large-scale conflict involving people from all over Europe. What could bring so many people from so far away to fight and die in this specific spot? One theory is that they were fighting for control of a causeway or a bridge that crossed the marshy Talens River. This route might have been a major trade artery, a Bronze Age highway for moving valuable goods like tin, copper, and amber. Control of such a choke point would have meant incredible wealth and power. The battle could have been a gigantic, violent toll dispute. Another theory suggests it was a more complex societal conflict. Perhaps it was a clash of cultures, a desperate struggle for resources during a time of climate change and social upheaval, or even a ritualized form of warfare we don't yet understand. The fighters were almost exclusively young men, aged between 20 and 40, seemingly in their physical prime. They were the warrior class of their societies. Interestingly, very few remains of women or children have been found, reinforcing the idea that this was a dedicated army on the move, not a migrating population that was ambushed. The equipment they carried also tells a story. While many weapons were found, so were personal items, bronze rings, spiral armbands, and clothing pins. It's as if these soldiers were caught completely by surprise or were overwhelmed so quickly they had no time to gather their belongings. Or, perhaps, after the battle, the victors stripped the dead of their most valuable possessions, leaving only these smaller trinkets behind. One of the most poignant discoveries is a small wooden box that held an individual's personal toolkit. Inside were bronze tools, an awl, a chisel, a knife, and other small implements, all carefully packed together. It's a very human touch amidst all the carnage. It belonged to someone. A person who was not just a warrior, but also a craftsman, someone with a life and skills beyond the battlefield. They traveled hundreds of miles to this river, perhaps as part of a larger force, carrying the tools of their trade only to meet a violent end. Their body, like so many others, was likely pushed into the river and lost to time, until now. What happened after the fighting stopped is another chilling part of the puzzle. The bodies were not properly buried. There are no grand tombs or burial mounds you might expect for fallen warriors. Instead, it seems they were simply left where they fell, or unceremoniously dumped into the river. Over time, the river's currents and the shifting mud tangled their bones together, creating a chaotic underwater mass grave. This lack of burial is highly unusual for Bronze Age cultures, which typically had deep respect for their dead and elaborate funeral rituals. It suggests a few possibilities. Maybe the victors were so exhausted or had suffered such heavy losses themselves that they could unbury the dead. Or perhaps, in a final act of desecration, they deliberately left their enemies' bodies to rot in the open, a terrifying warning to any who would challenge them. It's as if the ground itself was meant to remember the slaughter. The Talens Valley completely rewrites our understanding of the Bronze Age in Northern Europe. Before this discovery, many historians thought of the era as relatively peaceful, with small-scale tribal conflicts at worst. Talens proves that assumption wrong. It shows us a world capable of organizing and deploying large, well-equipped armies for massive, decisive battles. It reveals a level of social organization and military sophistication that we previously thought only existed in the more advanced civilizations of the Mediterranean and Near East, like the Egyptians or Mycenaean Greeks. Think about it. This battle took place around the same time as the legendary Trojan War described in Homer's Iliad. While we often think of Troy as a semi-mythical event, Talens is cold, hard, physical proof that epic battles were indeed a reality of this age. The screams may have faded, but the bones remain, a silent testament to a day of unimaginable violence. Each new discovery in the valley adds another piece to the puzzle, another chapter to this brutal story. Archaeologists are still excavating, using modern technology like underwater drones and ground-penetrating radar to map the extent of the battlefield. They believe what they've found so far is just a fraction of the whole story. The river and its banks still hold countless secrets. The Talens Valley isn't just an archaeological site. It's a time capsule. It's a direct, unfiltered window into a single, terrible day 3,250 years ago. It forces us to look at our prehistoric ancestors not as simple, primitive people, but as complex individuals capable of great loyalty, organization, and horrifying brutality. It's a stark reminder that the history written in bones can sometimes be the most powerful of all. The battlefield that never slept continues to speak, and we are only just beginning to understand what it's trying to tell us. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into our violent past as fascinating as I did, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into forgotten history. See you next time.